Weather Center, I'm Will Annan. George is still a minimal hurricane, but it could still strengthen before reaching the U.S. coastline a little bit later on within the next 24 to 48 hours. It has already left a path of destruction throughout the islands of the northeastern Caribbean, and it is being blamed for more than 100 deaths. For more on the hurricane and its path, we now turn to Bruce Edwards, who's standing by in the forecast center.
Thanks very much, Will, and good morning, everyone. We've just gotten the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center on the position of George, and a whole batch of new watches and warnings have been posted over the United States. We'll get to those in a minute. We look at the satellite picture, and as it cranks up again, you can see George centered over southeastern Cuba, as it has been all night long, and it will likely remain that way for a good chunk of today before it emerges out over the open waters of the ocean once again. Here's the latest information on George as of, well, this is the 2 a.m. advisory. Let me give you the latest coordinates now just in from the National Hurricane Center. George was centered at 21.1 north, 76.7 west, or about 75 miles east-southeast of Camagüey, Cuba, and about 400 miles southeast of Key West, Florida. George is moving to the west-northwest at about 12 miles per hour, and it's likely to continue on that track and staying along the north coast of Cuba much of the day today. Maximum sustained wind, still a minimal hurricane at 75 miles per hour, and likely to see some strengthening very late today once it gets out over water. But while it stays over land, we're not expecting any increase in strength whatsoever. And so once again, we'll be watching that central pressure 992 millibars. Now here's a look at the watch and warning frames. We're in the process of updating this right now. Let's take it piece by piece. First, as far as the hurricane warnings are concerned. Now, hurricane warnings have been discontinued for Haiti. So they have been discontinued for Haiti, the island Haiti, or the country of Haiti. Those are discontinued. But hurricane warning is now in effect for South Florida. Hurricane warning for South Florida from Deerfield Beach southward on the east coast and from Bonita Beach southward on the west coast. That includes the Florida Keys, Monroe, Dade, Broward, and Collier counties. Now, the same area that was under the hurricane watch has now been changed to a warning, a hurricane warning for that same area right in through there. Now, hurricane watches have been posted from Deerfield Beach north to Stuart, Florida on the east coast, and from just south of Longboat Key to Bonita Beach on the west coast. So they extended the hurricane watch a little farther north on both coasts of Florida, as far north as Stuart, Florida on the east coast, and as far north as Longboat Key on the west coast. That includes Palm Beach, Martin, Sarasota, Charlotte, and Lee counties. Now, we'll have this graphic updated for you as quickly as possible and give you that latest information. But that's the lowdown here. The wind field, well, there you can see it once again. Tropical storm force winds out to the southern Bahamas. Wind gusts of 62 miles an hour reported last hour at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Now, if you look at this radar here, we're just beginning to see in the lower corner here some of the moisture associated with Hurricane George. False echoes over land, but it shows you that it's in the ballpark, so to speak. Now, thousands of people were forced to evacuate the Florida Keys on Wednesday, and South Florida again is under that hurricane warning now just issued by the National Hurricane Center. The governor of Florida has declared a state of emergency in central and southern Florida that allows the state to use National Guard to lift the tolls along the evacuation routes and to purchase some emergency supplies. Residents were stocking up and boarding up their homes yesterday as time permitted. Now, George is considerably weaker right now over Cuba than it was when it made landfall on the island of Hispaniola on Tuesday, but the death toll continues to rise. More than 100 people are reported dead in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. George is still dumping some torrential rainfall, which resulted in severe flooding as it moved over Hispaniola. But again, the more optimistic news there is that the hurricane warnings have been dropped for Haiti on the island of Hispaniola. Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist, now joins us this morning, and well, as we anticipated yesterday, the warnings expanded now across South Florida, but fortunately George has stayed over Cuba, at least for the continental U.S. is fortunate.
That's right. Good news that the eye of the circulation is just hanging along the coast, and it hasn't developed much at all overnight. Here you can see the overall circulation. The center is roughly right in here and still continuing on this same general track. And if that continued, of course, it would go across very close to Key West. But keep in mind, we don't want to concentrate on a single path. Instead, it's more of a swath. And of course, the overall circulation has a relatively large area of stronger winds.
And of course, as we saw on that one radar out of South Florida, we're already seeing some of the moisture flowing up, and that's well out ahead of where that center is, coming across the straits and Andros Island.
Jim Cantori will be a little cooler today with that easterly breeze coming in, and that easterly breeze and northeasterly breeze should accelerate more this afternoon and into tonight.
Well, as we look at the position of it on the satellite, let's look at the latest projection as far as where George may go.
Yeah, and here you can see the best guess, of course, the Hurricane Center official forecast is right up in through this general vicinity. And, of course, keep in mind, this takes it into the Gulf of Mexico, so the people basically from New Orleans to the east should now keep an eye on, or at least monitor the situation. And, of course, now we've got the warnings in South Florida, so if you've been debating on whether or not to put up your shutters, now's the time to do it. Once a warning comes up, hurricane force winds are likely, and that does not mean the hurricane will run right over you. It means you will get hurricane force winds likely within the next 24 hours, and the closest approach should be sometime tomorrow morning.
So basically we're going to be watching for the center to come back over water, and once it does, then we could see some intensification.
That is correct, and the hurricane's forecasting intensity changed to Category 2. Right now it's a minimal 1, and we don't want to call that minimal for to think that it should be thought of as not anything, because it's already produced a lot of heavy wind and gusty winds and rain as well. But it does forecast a Category 2.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Steve Lyons, for that information. We'll have continuous updates throughout the course of the day on George, and once again we'll have that graphic display of all the watches and warnings that are up for South Florida in just a few moments. We remind you that when you go to work today, you can still get the latest on the hurricane and all the tropical information at weather.com on the internet. Now, Weather Will Annan gives us a look at the rest of the nation that's cooling down a little bit. Will?
Okay, Bruce, we'll talk about, first of all, the northeastern part of the country where it's really cooled off during the last 3, 4, or 5 days since last weekend, with a series of fronts beginning to roll on through. And a weak upper level disturbance this morning beginning to roll across Kansas into Missouri, producing some severe weather in the nation's midsection. Take a look at the cool weather right now. We're looking at widespread 30s and lower 40s across all of New England. Also a cool spot again throughout the Midwest, but still very, very muggy throughout the Gulf Coast, where temperatures are still remaining in the 70s as of this hour. This is a look at what's happening throughout the Great Lakes states. We'll show you the rain blowing out of Wisconsin right now into lower Michigan, looking at some more rains too, beginning to approach Kalamazoo and also South Bend. And take a look at the rainfall in and around Chicago just in time for the rush hour. But it's speeding along from Chicago back to Rockford and Freeport in the eastern parts of Iowa. And then to the west of there, we pick up some stronger storms, which have been developing around one.
Good morning. It's time now for your tropical update, and we start things off by checking out a very, very active weather pattern in the tropics. First of all, as you know, we're tracking very closely Hurricane George, which continues to churn up the waters across the Caribbean. Right now, the center of circulation somewhere over eastern Cuba. But besides George, we have 3 more tropical systems too poised out across the Atlantic. So an extremely active weather pattern right now for the tropics. Here's the very latest information that we have on Hurricane George. It is right now at 21.1 north, 76.7 west. That is roughly centered about 395 miles southeast of Miami, with top sustained winds at 75 miles an hour, and right now spinning off towards the west-northwest at some 12 miles per hour. As you can see, it's been fairly consistent, continuing with that west-northwestward movement over the last several days or so. We still have a strong area of high pressure poised to the north, which is helping to deflect and keep George moving in that west-northwesterly fashion. And we don't really see a whole lot to change that general movement, at least for the next 24 hours or so. Now, there's still speculation about the exact path that George may take, but at least most of the forecast models currently are favoring a scenario that would take George somewhere over the Florida Keys and then perhaps re-emerging over the eastern Gulf. Again, it's still speculation, but we'll certainly keep a very close eye on the possibilities of what could happen with Hurricane George. At this point, numerous watches and warnings remain in effect, and we now have hurricane warnings in effect for some portions of southern Florida. And when we talk about a hurricane warning, that means hurricane conditions are very much likely, in fact probable, in the next 24 hours. Now, just north of these areas, up towards Stewart, and likewise up towards Longboat Key in Florida, here we have hurricane watches in effect, meaning conditions too might be favoring hurricane-like conditions sometime in the next 36 hours or so. So definitely for those of you in southern Florida and across the northwestern Bahamas, take the necessary precautions and preparations and start boarding up your windows and just start stocking up on supplies just in case the hurricane does move in your direction. Again, it's a very serious situation as we are tracking very closely Hurricane George. The strongest winds right now right around the core, right around the center of circulation, but we do have a fairly large wind profile with tropical storm force winds extending out from the center of circulation. And again, the highest strike probability takes George somewhere back towards the Florida Keys and then perhaps taking it over the eastern sections of the Gulf of Mexico. Besides George, though, we have Tropical Storm Karl. The good news with Karl, though, is that it's kind of pulling away from the Bahamas after producing some strong winds around the Bahamas yesterday. Besides that, we also have Hurricane Ivan, and at this point it's packing winds of 80 miles per hour moving towards the north-northwest. The good news with this is that we think it will stay back towards the open waters and really not posing any threat to any land areas. Along with that, we have another hurricane, Hurricane Jeanne, which is now just to the west of the Cape Verde Islands. It's about 690 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands, still packing winds of 105 miles per hour, and further strengthening may be likely. This one is lifting off towards the west-northwest at some 16 miles an hour, and at least with this, again, it's back over the open waters. This one, too, will likely try to recurve, maybe turning more towards the northwest over time. But luckily, with Karl and Ivan and Jeanne, they're not really posing any major threats at the time being. Now, here's another satellite perspective of Hurricane Jeanne. You can see a big ball of convection, lots of heavy rains, but again, it's west of the Cape Verde Islands, and right now not posing any major problems for anybody. For us, though, the big weather story continues to be Hurricane George. We've already had several fatalities. I think at least 100 people have died because of Hurricane George, and we've seen billions of dollars worth of damage as well. Stay tuned. We'll have a more complete update and a complete wrap-up regarding Hurricane George coming up.
Each time a disturbance comes off the coast of Africa, we follow that until it develops into a storm or whatever it does. That way you're prepared and you're safe, out of harm's way.
1 can of paint, $26.
Al, check approval, register 5.
1 can of paint, $26.
Al, check approval on 5.
1 lousy can of paint, $26.
Al.
Knowing you'll never have to wait for Al, priceless. Debit MasterCard withdraws right from your checking account without the hassle of checks. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's Debit MasterCard.
Al.